What is up, guys? Welcome back to Fangents. We are excited because we're going to do a fun little ranking video. Obviously, you'll see that we have a Star Wars one on there, and we were like, why don't we do the MCU? That rhymed. I like that. That was fun.
Smooth.
So we kind of went back and forth and tried to think about the best way to kind of rank the MCU movies. And we came up with, Jake came up with, let's do it by phase. So we're going to kind of go through phase one today. Myself, as I said, and Maren Lewis, followed by my co-host,
Jake Carter.
Yeah. Long intro today.
I'm very excited for this.
Yeah.
So get into the juicy Marvel.
Yeah. I actually had to go back and watch Incredible Hulk before we started this because
you've never seen it, right?
forgot. Well, bits and pieces on FX throughout the years, but never like fully together.
Yeah.
So we'll get right into it.
You're not missing much.
Yeah. So we'll start with the main 6 movies out of phase 1. Iron Man 1 coming out in May of 2008, followed by Incredible Hulk coming out in June 2008. Then Iron Man 2. Iron Man 2, 2010 in May. Thor in 2011 May. See, Jake's way better with the dates, so we're probably going to host phase 2. Captain America in July of 2011, and Avengers coming out in May of Avengers.
God bless America, just in time for the 4th of July.
So, Iron Man 1, Thor, Incredible Hulk, Captain America, and Avengers. So just the 6 films for this. Let's start in our number 6 spot. Incredible Hulk. Now, Jake, I'll let you kick it off. Why Incredible Hulk? Why number 6?
So for me, I think Incredible Hulk is probably the least memorable of the movies from this first phase. And clearly, a big part of that was with the whole recasting from Edward Norton to Mark Ruffalo for the Hulk. I think the story, it starts to kind of set up some things, and clearly, some of the characters and through lines, they tried to keep going in the MCU with, Thunderbolt Ross. I mean, R.I.P. William Hurt, and I know he's going to play a huge part in the next Captain America movie with Harrison Ford playing the role. But overall, I think the film is just kind of it's a little bit more inconsequential than some of the other films in the first phase in terms of setting up the rest of the universe. It was a big deal when we see Tony in sort of the post-credit scene for this film. I remember that was kind of cool because this film, like you said, came out in June of 2008, which was the month after Iron Man came out, which at the time nobody really knew where this universe was going to take off. And so to see somebody that we literally just saw a month earlier, Tony Stark, pop up in this film was kind of exciting and cool. But yeah, I mean, other than that, I think the movie just was a very meh plot and not really that exciting. I mean, some cool moments, but yeah.
Yeah, no, it's especially watching it back a couple days ago. Pacing in it is just so off for me. It's just a wham, bam, thank you, ma'am, kind of pop, 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 which fast pacing in movies can be good and it can be, kind of cram a lot into it. But I just felt like there's a lot of go stop. A lot of quick. And I don't know, I felt like I never got to connect with this Bruce Banner. I felt like I never got to connect with Betty Ross. That's funny. I just realized because isn't that the lady that made the first American flag, Betty Ross?
Oh, Betsy Ross? Was it
Betsy Ross?
Yeah.
Either way,
yeah.
Elizabeth
Close
Ross,
enough.
right?
Close enough.
And the whole leader thing with I'm blanking on that actor's name.
Oh, yeah, the guy who was in the Watchmen HBO show.
Yeah.
Tim Blake Nelson.
Yeah. That guy, I don't know. It's just kind of felt like a disjointed. It's fun, most kind of superhero movies in my opinion, but yeah, it's just kind of inconsequential.
Which is interesting because them setting up him to be the leader, which is a huge villain in the Marvel comics, that was one of the longest loose threads that Marvel had. And so when they announced that he was going to pop into the next Captain America movie, was kind of a cool way to okay, that's cool. It matters.
Get it revived.
And then even with the announcement that Liv Tyler is going to be back.
That was
Betty
actually
Ross.
a couple days ago. Actually. Yeah.
So that's going to be kind of exciting. At least that they're not completely forgetting that movie, but
yeah.
But we can't.
To be honest with you, for the longest time, I never considered the Incredible Hulk part of the MCU. It wasn't until about a year ago that Jake was like, oh, no, it's considered part of the MCU. And I was like, oh, well, shit, okay.
Yeah.
So for me, that's why it's at number 6. Moving on to get into, I feel like the dream team, the meat and potatoes of the movies. We got at number 5. Jake, you want to shout out number 5?
Another! we got our blonde babe himself, Thor, the God of Thunder.
Good old Fabio.
Yep.
for me, part of the reason why I put this at the number 5 spot in the phase 1 is it's just kind of unimpressive. Question mark. Like Asgard looks cool. Like this, how they set it up and how they explain kind of like mythology with science and like how the Asgardians are able to like live and crap. Like that's really cool, but it's kind of inconsequential plot in a sense. Well, not inconsequential. It's, I don't know. Thor comes down to Earth or gets exiled to Earth, right? And then Loki's trying to take over, sends like the Destroyer. I don't know.
There's a lot of interesting little decisions that were made in this movie. Like, one thing that I really don't like in this movie are some of the interesting like camera angles that they did. Like kind of this weird like sideways like coming in. Like I remember specifically towards the end of the movie when like the Destroyer's coming and like when you see Natalie Portman, you know, it's like a weird angle that I'm just like, oh, this feels kind of disjointed from the rest of the Marvel. And you could tell that they were still trying to kind of figure out the visual language of the MCU.
Yeah, because a lot of those we see in Iron Man 2 as well.
Yeah, exactly. But I also really don't like Thor's look in this movie. Clearly, they are also trying to figure this out. You know, the very bleached, like very short beard that he had, and like the eyebrows they were even bleaching. Yeah. Poor Chris Hemsworth was like, "I'll do anything to, you know, get this role." But he did great in the role. Like I love him as Thor. Yeah, no, there's a reason that he's still around. And but yeah, for me, this movie also just kind of sits very low. I mean, granted, like we got to be introduced to Loki as well, which really just like sets up a lot of cool stuff.
Tom Hiddleston to this day, like post Loki series coming out, probably one of my favorite like MCU characters. Yeah, or like his portrayal of MCU character. He's one of my favorite MCU actors. I
would put him up there with Robert Downey Jr. Like I think
they've become the role,
level of it. Yeah, they are extensions of their character basically. Another shout out character wise, I would say would be for Anthony Hopkins as Odin. I think he did a really good job. Yeah. Just kind of crushed it. But
yeah. So kind of quick and easy, and that's kind of why Thor's number 5. So
and don't even get us started on the three his group.
Thor.
We went to a trivia night, and this is one of the ones we got wrong. Yeah, couldn't remember their names.
Like I said, unimpressive. Yeah. So we get to the last 4, and Jake and I actually had a lot of conversation because I think our order of 4 through 1 were different. So we kind of compromised. And how we're kind of rating these movies is just ones we like. Was the story good? Was the character portrayals like good? Those kind of things. I think we're going a little easier on phase 1, at least in my head I am, because it was very much establishing it. So that's saying let's keep rolling. Number 4. Iron Man 2. This is actually, I want to say, I think my favorite Iron Man.
Oh, out of all of them.
Okay. No, I'm going to retract that. I wasn't confident in saying it.
No, yeah.
I don't know. But one of the things I like is I just love that final battle where we get Rhodey as a War Machine. It is really fun, yeah. And the recasting of Rhodey with Don Cheadle.
Yeah.
Which I love his portrayal as Rhodey.
Yeah, crush it.
Yeah. But I don't know. I think it's a fun movie. The only downside is we get like an Elon Musk cameo.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, which I completely forgot about till I think 2 years ago when somebody pointed out on the internet. Yeah. But
we do get the cool like briefcase suit armor that like I'm here for. You know?
But I think like I'm trying not to like get ahead of ourselves.
Yeah.
But with Iron Man 2, like I don't know. I felt like I think one of the things that I liked was we got more kind of grungy Tony Stark in the sense of like, a little bit from his like, family's past of like them kind of creating this empire and like, did they steal this arc reactor idea from like this Russian family? Like, did they leave him out? Like that kind of stuff. I like that we get introduced to Natasha Romanoff, the Black Widow.
Although I don't like, this is such a nitpick, but her like, again, her like weird hair. Yeah, it's like too curly. I'm like, clearly they were trying to figure out what these characters would look like. And so it is nice once we get later on in the phases to see where they landed. But for me, I think why this movie ranks where it does is Iron Man 2, like there's just so much they crammed in here. And like a lot of, I think the reason why people don't like it as much as the other ones is because it is kind of more of like setting up a lot more in the MCU, because we do have Black Widow in there. We have Nick Fury come. There's a lot of like little references, Easter eggs to Wakanda, and like there's the map at the end of the scene. There's even one in the water that people were like, "Oh,
we get the cap shield."
We get the cap shield, right? And even in the story itself, they tried to kind of adapt a little bit loosely from the famous Iron Man comic, Demon in a Bottle, which deals with Tony's alcoholism and stuff. And so we get like a little bit of that, but like clearly they wanted to focus on just his own personification in this universe. So I just think they were trying to do too much with it. I think if you had stripped down some of this or stripped back on some, I think it would have been a better film. But.
Yeah, which I think in like future thoughts too, I think we'll get to like when we get into like phase more phase 4 and then starting phase 5, I think you'll hear us talk about more of like, I think having a more concise story is hard to do in the MCU because it's grown so much, but I think some of the strongest movies in the MCU are those ones where it is kind of like self-contained. They really focus on just driving that point home. And so yeah, at the end of the day, I conceded the point. I wanted to put Iron Man 2 higher, but when you brought that up, I was like, yeah, I agree with that. Kind of it was almost like a perpetuating the MCU compared to being like an Iron Man sequel.
That being said, I think it does have a lot of rewatchability, and it's a fun time, you know.
Yeah, but I feel like most MCU movies have that rewatchability factor, and like that's why we're still talking about them. You know what?
Except Thor: The Dark World, later, but we'll wait till phase 2.
Yeah. All right, coming in at number 3, we got Captain America:
First Avenger.
I think I can't remember the subtitle on that. What I like about this is it's a period piece. I love a good period piece.
Oh, I'm a sucker for some period pieces. You know what I'm saying?
I feel like it's very like stereotypical, like American to be like, yes, World War II, let's go. But like, just like it could have been, the Spanish-American War in the 1800s, and I still would have been like, yeah, like. But I love that we get introduced to Captain America, and I love how they like put that kind of modern spin on him, in the sense of I think there was a big concern. We'll get to when we get to the Avengers movie. A big concern with bringing this very isolated in time character, right? Created during, World War II, kind of to like bring hope and patriotism and all that fun stuff. Like, how do we bring him into like a modern sense where he's not just, this stereotypical, tight tights and like, bright colors kind of, superhero.
Yeah, because it's kind of goofy when you really think about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And so like, I think they did a great job of kind of starting off that way, especially like making fun of it, having him like this like, kind of like the circus person go around to like increase morale with the soldiers around, the Western Front and stuff. And then to be like, recognize that it is a little silly, but to keep going. So
yeah. For me, I like this movie because it feels like an Indiana Jones kind of style adventure film.
Yeah.
Especially when we get a little bit later, mainly because it is a period piece. But once Cap actually is kind of fed up with being this sort of like propaganda monkey basically running around, and actually gets to the action of like busting out other soldiers from some POW camps and stuff, like that whole montage sequence, like so freaking rad.
Yeah,
I really enjoyed that. And so there were some shots and things they did that were very reminiscent of Indiana Jones. Like I think they even take the whole map motif that they use in Indiana Jones, where it's like a transition where you see like a plane kind of flying.
Yeah.
I think they borrowed that. But yeah, I really enjoyed it, and I enjoy it more every time I go back and watch it. So
yeah. I think one of the things that we discussed too is I think out of all the MCU movies, this is the best origin story for our hero. Like maybe it's because for me personally, like I knew who Captain America was, but I was not familiar necessarily with the story when the movie came out. So to kind of go into it semi-naive and kind of fresh, I think hit a little harder. I think it's a better origin story than say Iron Man, but I think Iron Man as a MCU movie is better. I think it's better than what other origin stories do we have?
I mean, Doctor Strange.
That's a trippy one.
Yeah.
But yeah, I still stand by that. I still think Captain America, First Avenger, is probably the best like origin.
And I think part of that is to your point where you were saying of they did a good job of modernizing him in a way, like adapting him from the comics to fit in this world. And that even comes into play later on in like Winter Soldier and Civil War and later on in the universe.
I do like that through line, jumping ahead a little bit, of like there's always not repercussions necessarily, but there is always like that little bit of reminder of, he's not from this time, he's not from that time. And then, jumping way ahead, we do get that payoff eventually in phase 3 of like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Like he's just been kind of like this ghost. What is it in John Wick 4? Like you're just a ghost looking for a graveyard.
Yeah.
Like that's Steve Rogers. That's Steve Rogers. All right, number 2. The one that kicked it off, the granddaddy of all MCU movies, the Robert Downey Jr. revival campaign, Iron Man 1, or just Iron Man. Jake, I'll let you take it on this one.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, this is what started it all. Like, without this movie, like, we wouldn't be here. But I think what's kind of cool is I don't they didn't really know what this universe was going to turn into, right? And like, I think picking a character of Iron Man who was at the time more of a B level hero was risky, and obviously using Robert Downey Jr., who wasn't super popular at the time and had a lot of like stuff in his past that he was still dealing with, come in to like be the lead was a huge risk, but then hella paid off for them. And yeah, I think it's just a nice tight story, like it's just like to the point, but then it subverts, I think, the superhero genre really well. And specifically seen in the end, right, when he's like, I am Iron Man. That is such a definitive moment that you're like, oh, okay, this guy isn't just Batman, right?
I like how that was an improvisation by RDJ.
Yeah, and it's so, I love that. And like just the whole scene of like him with like the cards and is like, no, I'm just gonna wing it, you know?
Yeah.
Like it just perfectly captures the essence of this character.
Like he is Tony Stark.
When he was like, I am Iron Man, like that was literally Robert Downey Jr. to us being like, no, I am this guy.
Yeah. That is me.
Yeah. And like,
I'm the captain now.
Right. And also like, I think this movie introduced us to what has now become kind of standard across a lot of these superhero films, the post-credit scene.
Oh yeah.
Because you think back, it's like that wasn't really a thing before this movie. So
was it not?
I don't think, I mean, I could be wrong, and please correct me if I am, but I think this was like one of the first that had like an official kind of like in tag kind of scenes that was meant to start to like kind of hint at what was to come next. Yeah. I mean, I'm assuming other movies, if they did have a sort of in scene kind of thing, was kind of more of a tie up for the story that we just watched versus setting something else. So,
well, yeah, I can't really think of.
Yeah, I mean,
like I know. I do think there were like post-credit scenes before, but I don't think, I think in the sense of like a little additive to the end or like...
It's like we had the Ferris Bueller Day Off one.
Well, but in X3, we get the one where Xavier's in, like, they go to that...
Oh, yeah, he puts himself in the other body, but they didn't even really use that, or that didn't pay off anywhere.
Still, I think it was like the most, like, you know, I think that like supplanted like the, hey, we're going to do this, like, kind of that standard.
And now, like, it's kind of just common knowledge. Like, if you don't stay behind, you're going to probably miss out. Like, we left for John Wick 4, and there was a post-credit scene, which is crazy.
That was an unexpected one.
Yeah.
So, and then I like how there's a difference between like the mid-credit scene and the post-credit scene. Oh, yeah. Like, it's like taking on its own like new kind
and
of
there's
like,
usually like one of them's usually a little bit lighter gag, and then one's kind of setting something else up. So yeah.
All right, and then moving on to our number one film in the MCU Phase 1. The Avengers. Doesn't have a subtitle, does it?
Nope.
Yeah, just the Avengers. Obviously, you know, it's number one for a lot of reasons, but it's the one that brings them all together. I think this is like the first like MCU movie, right? Prior to this, like, yes, all those other movies are MCU, but they're still like Thor and Iron Man could have just had their own little franchises and never come together. Like, same with like Captain America, like, you know. Incredible Hulk, obviously, but like this being the first one where it's like, no, these are all they're all in the same universe. These are all the same characters, and we're gonna keep this going. I think unprecedented, right? I don't think we've seen that in like a cinematic history.
I like to think that I can remember where I was the first time I saw footage of them all assembled together, but I can't. But I know it affected me, and it changed me forever as a fan, because I was like, oh my god, this is so cool.
Yeah,
you know, this literally, it changed everything. Like, it was just seeing them all team up, and I think what they nailed really well was the chemistry between all the characters. You know, everybody kind of got their own moment
of.
Well, or lack of. I mean, Hawkeye being like mind controlled the whole movie, right? Yeah.
But it's like in like, sorry, keep going.
No, but I was just gonna say, like, I think like the dynamic between the characters works really well. Like, clearly from the get go, you can tell that there's, you know, a little friction between Tony and Steve, and then kind of Bruce Banner being sort of like the outlier kind of the group. And then Thor just being like, all right, you stupid Earthlings, like, you know, it works so well together. And then having Loki as the main villain, just beautifully done. Yeah, I really enjoyed it. And it's, again, talk about rewatchability. I can't tell you how many times I've watched that film. And just so easy to watch because it just kind of flies by. And
it does. The only thing, like, looking back at it, and like they corrected a lot of this in Phase 2 and onward, is like, watch Avengers 2, Age of Ultron, right? And then watch Avengers 1 and compare the visual languages there. Like, I always mess up his name. Josh Whedon. Josh Whedon.
Yeah.
That guy.
Yeah.
I realized that at that time, it was cool and hype. Some time go by, I'm like, oh man, like you went a little too zany with like the look. It's such a bright movie. Like it is bright and bold and bam. Like no wonder people didn't like his take on the Justice League. Oh.
Yeah.
Because it was like that same thing, right? So I think for phase one, if we like look at it like we are right now, kind of like in its own little bubble, I think it's okay kind of like to take like these interesting takes on character looks and visual languages because they were still trying to find their identity. But after watching, 2 and onward, compare like phase one, you're like, woo! Like I had forgotten how bleached they made Chris Hemsworth's beard and hair for his Thor role.
Yeah.
Like
kind of jarring.
Yeah. And now he's just pretty much, light brown,
all
dirty,
natural.
light brown, dirty, blonde color. Like yeah.
And also shout out Coulson in this movie.
Yeah,
because he, which again, kind of another little sad thing of like we haven't seen him again. I mean, besides Agents of Shield, which not really canon anymore, but his whole glorious like hero moment and stuff, I think stands up.
Yeah. I think also too. Oh, I just lost train of thought. Just gone with the wind.
Gone. Yeah, that's all right.
Yeah.
But yeah, what a great film, and like just tying it all together, I think.
So
they did a good job.
Yeah, let's talk about like the phase one as like a whole, right? We probably will do not to say a ranking, but maybe a comparison video after we do all the phases of kind of like which one's our favorite phase, why, and that kind of stuff. But like at like phase one, if you had to give it like a grade, then we're improvising here, right? If you had to give it like A through F, right, with pluses and minuses, what would you give phase one?
I think I would give it a solid B because I think, I don't know truly like how much they had planned out when they started this. Like I think with Iron Man, they were like, oh, it'd be cool if we could, have this kind of branch out to a whole universe. But I don't think they had everything as planned out as they do like currently, right? Like Kevin Feige's talked about how they have 10 years worth of movies and shows planned out. And while that's really exciting to hear, like that definitely wasn't how they started. So I think them kind of figuring out, what the visual language is and what these characters are like and how they interact with each other and how they're interconnected, but yet how they stand on their own. I think they did their best they could with trying to make it work in phase one. But yeah, I mean, it is a little, you do look back at phase one compared to, now, and it is a little bit different. You're just like, oh, okay. But I don't know. I think in the context of this phase, I think they did a decent job of, introducing these new characters and then making them fit together in this world, like coexisting.
Yeah. No, I agree. I'm gonna also give it a B. I think in the sense of foundational forces, this was the best lineup and / execution of movies to kind of build the foundation that the house of the MCU sits on. I feel like any other characters outside of these guys would have been made a little shaky. Like for instance, like I know Iron Man wasn't like the most popular Marvel character in the comics and kind of like pop culture knowledge wise prior to the movies coming out. So it's like the fact that they chose him to kind of kick this off, or like weren't expecting to kick off, and it did. I think is really cool. But also like the fact that they were like, okay, kicked off the Iron Man, and hey, like Stark technology, his influence is kind of like the through line, that connective tissue through the first 3 phases. That I don't know, it's kind of cool. Just imagine if like I know, forget like contracts and distribution rights. Just imagine if like the MCU kicked off with like another batch of Spider-Man movies.
That'd be cool,
right? Like that'd be cool. But one thing, this is what I was gonna say earlier. I remembered, came back around. One of the things I do like is that we get like these little sprinkles of leading up to the Avengers movie of the characters that are going to be in it, right? So end of Iron Man, we get Nick Fury. Iron Man 2, we get Black Widow. Thor is when we get introduced to Hawkeye. And so it's like by the time, like besides those 3 not having their own movie and the other 3 having their own movie, like by the time we get to Avengers, it just kind of feels like, yeah, we're getting the band together.
Yeah, it feels earned. I feel like how they set it all up made a lot of sense. So,
and I'm glad you said that, because I think that's one of the things that a lot of another comic book film franchise struggled with, was that there was not that sense of it was earned, or that sense of, kind of putting in the work, if you will.
Yeah.
And I think we'll get to in later videos, like that might be kind of creeping into the MCU now as well. But yeah, I'm gonna say, what a great start. Good job, Marvel. Proud of you.
Did a pretty good job. So
yeah. Well, we'll leave it there. Not a lot to talk about because, these movies have kind of been flushed, here and there and all that fun stuff. So we'll be probably doing phase 2 here shortly. And that's a fun one. Looking forward to that.
Oh, yeah.
All right, everybody. I have been Aaron.
I've been Jake.
And you know what? Get in those comments. Let us know your thoughts. Which ones are your favorites and which ones weren't? And
what's your rank?
Yeah. What's your ranking? Let us know what you'd like to see from us in the future. But until then, bye-bye.
Have a marvelous day.
Hey!